Iran thought it was invisible. 30 ships disguised as cargo vessels slipped quietly toward a sleepy American town off Oregon's coast, tanks and armored carriers hidden below their decks. But what they didn't know was that a single UAV 12 miles above them tracked every move in real time, like an unseen hand guiding their fate. Within minutes of stepping into the kill box, their fleet would be ripped apart. So how does a so-called invisible invasion collapse into fire and wreckage in under 6 minutes? This is the story of the trap they never saw coming. Before we move on, I would like you to subscribe to the channel and like the video. How does a fleet of 30 warships disguised as harmless merchant vessels vanish into the Pacific's crowded shipping lanes without anyone realizing it, only to be watched the entire time by a silent eye floating far above? Iranian planners believed they had outsmarted every layer of surveillance. To them, it wasn't an audacious gamble. It was a strategy they thought history had already proved successful. Paint the ships in neutral colors, mimic cargo routes, keep the radios cold, and slip through the seams of radar coverage. On the surface, they looked like drifting cargo ships carrying steel or grain, but below deck rested tanks, armored vehicles, and crates of missiles ready to unload once shorelines were reached. They had rehearsed the tricks, turning down radar signatures, using encrypted bursts of communication only at prearranged moments, and running their engines at civilian speed limits to blend into the mass of commercial shipping moving through the Pacific each night. The commanders viewed electronic silence as armor. They assumed that without constant transmissions, American coastal stations would be blind, and traditional over-the-horizon radar could only sweep the broader ocean in clumsy arcs. Their past studies of naval warfare convinced them silence worked. World War II submarines often crossed oceans listening, but never talking, appearing only when it was too late. Cold War bombers had done the same, throttling down radios while slipping beneath radar ridgelines. Iran treated these examples not as lessons from another age, but as a proven formula they could dust off and apply in the 21st century. They saw the Pacific as wide, open, and forgiving, a place where 30 camouflaged ships could vanish among thousands of legitimate cargo carriers. What Iran didn't know was that absence of noise no longer meant absence of detection. Above them cruised an American stealth UAV. Its sensors weren't listening for chatter on the airwaves, nor was it straining to catch radar reflections in a storm of commercial traffic. It was tracking heat signatures, subtle wakes, and course changes with digital clarity. Every minor adjustment, every shift in formation, every variation in engine output was cataloged in real time and flashed back to Naval Command. The UAV acted like a silent witness, invisible to the very fleet that believed itself invisible. Iranian officers on board mistook the night sky for empty black space. In truth, they were outlined on an American display down to the kilometer, locked into a web that neither radio silence nor disguises could escape. To Iranian planners, US coastal defenses meant tower-mounted radars scanning limited ranges out from Oregon and Washington, maybe a destroyer or two patrolling in international waters. They counted on confusion generated by thousands of legitimate merchant vessels moving along those routes. In their minds, American surveillance was old, predictable, and easy to bypass. That false assumption made their confidence solid and their discipline firm. Orders were repeated across the fleet. No chatter, maintain cover story, hold positions tight. They believed they had slipped under the edge of America's vision. Instead, the opposite was happening. They had been tagged from their first nautical mile and were now being followed like insects inside a jar. Visualize it. 30 ships moving together under cover of disguise, lower decks crammed with troops, armored transports strapped down with chains, and fuel packed in sealed containers. They thought the ocean covered them, yet over every bow and stern ran coordinates, mapped quietly into an American command system where patient operators watched the same dots crawl steadily east. This was the unseen hand at work, not loud, not obvious, and never acknowledged. It was a dragnet of intelligence where nothing shouted, but everything counted: position, trajectory, time, and intent. The Iranians drifted closer toward a coast they swore was blind, never realizing it was already measuring each inch of their progress. By the time dawn streaked the horizon, they were still advancing confidently. No pings on their radar, no sign of enemy aircraft, not even the echo of an American patrol. So they pressed forward, unaware they were already preloaded into a precision strike grid. The sense of invisibility that once gave them courage was, in reality, the very reason they remained unaware of being trapped. What they thought was silence became a beacon. From its first hour at sea, the so-called invisible convoy was under unblinking surveillance. Each vessel assigned a fate it had not yet imagined, but surveillance alone was only the beginning. Offshore, the true trap had already been built long before those ships left port. Imagine entering a patch of ocean where your every move, every second of survival is already written down before you even arrive. That was the reality facing the Iranian fleet as it pushed eastward, convinced it had chosen its route, only to drift into a space of water where its destruction had been planned months earlier. This was not improvisation. It was a prepared ambush called Operation Black Tide. The killbox was precise, 22 nautical miles wide, 35 nautical miles long, with firing solutions and strike patterns already set. The coordinates weren't guesses written on a map. They were calibrated calculations, tested and waiting. To the Iranian commanders, they had found freedom of movement in an empty ocean. In truth, they had entered a zone where time and distance had been stripped away, replaced by an exact sequence of firepower that had only one possible outcome. The concept of a killbox sounds clinical, but its purpose is simple. Imagine a hunting blind in the woods. A hunter isn't chasing deer across uneven ground. Instead, he positions himself where the trails intersect, where the animal must walk unaware it has stepped into a place designed for its downfall. Now stretch that idea into the ocean and magnify it with modern weapon systems. That is the killbox. It is not a place where war happens by accident. It is the field where war is forced to happen, chosen not by those entering it, but by the ones who built it. The Iranians thought their disguises gave them control over where a fight might occur, but every nautical mile drew them deeper into a corridor lined with invisible sensors and watching eyes. Waiting inside that corridor were assets set for synchronized fire. Overhead circled UAVs armed not only with surveillance gear, but with precision bombs already coded to specific hull shapes. Beneath the waves, a Virginia-class submarine sat motionless, engines silent, watching through sonar as the disguised warships glided overhead. On land, hidden batteries along the Pacific Rim held cross-range missile systems, their targeting linked invisibly to the flow of drone data. At sea, U.S. surface vessels had fanned out beyond radar range, ensuring overlapping arcs of fire could close from three sides. There was no single weapon to be deployed at the right moment. It was a network of weapons waiting together, triggered not by discovery but by the clockwork plan that started running once the first Iranian bow touched the invisible lines. For the Iranian formation, the illusion remained secure. Radars swept but found nothing. No hostile signals pinged them. Sky and horizon appeared empty, rendering silence as protection. Commanders believed the Americans were absent. What that meant, psychologically, was confidence at the exact moment when alarm should have risen. Every lookout posted saw only calm sea and civilian traffic far off in the dark. That quiet did not signify freedom. It was the sign that their entry into the killbox was complete. The trap was activated not by warning signals but by absence. Because when nothing interrupts your path, nothing breaks formation, and nothing forces you to maneuver, you continue to drift directly into the place your enemy has shaped for you. The countdown began at the instant the first ship crossed coordinates. In an operations room hundreds of miles away, digital grids shifted from standby to execution mode. Fire missions already written months earlier snapped into relevance, matching each ship to predetermined vectors of attack. Targets were listed, transports first, then flagships, then escort vessels. Inside the fleet itself, no one noticed the shift. The ocean did not change color, the air did not thicken, the sounds of men working on deck and engines throbbing below remained the same. Outwardly, life on those disguised hulls continued with order, unaware that every minute placed them deeper into a space that acted more like a chamber than an open ocean. Ships began exploding before their crews even realized they were under attack. It wasn't the sound of incoming fire or the sight of enemy vessels that gave it away. It was confusion. Confusion that came too fast for any clear recognition. One moment, Iranian sailors were running standard night watches. The next, flags and command decks were erupting into fire as bombs struck within seconds of one another. It looked nothing like a traditional battle. There were no warning sirens, no aerial formations sweeping out of the clouds. Destruction simply appeared, shock and chaos arriving before anyone on deck had time to process what was happening. 80 UAVs loomed high above the fleet and released their loads simultaneously. In less than 5 seconds, scores of precision munitions screamed down, each one assigned to ships already marked months in advance. The lead transport took the first hits, its decks torn open where armored vehicles had been chained below. Another strike ripped through the flagship's bridge, vaporizing the command center that should have coordinated the defense. Explosions rolled across the ocean in sequence, bright flares punching upward until the black sky looked splintered by fire. Dozens of Iranian sailors were thrown overboard by blasts so sudden they still clutched tools from midnight maintenance or cigarettes lit only moments earlier. But the fire did not stay contained. Fuel stores ruptured immediately, sending flaming rivers across the water's surface. Ships caught in tight formation found themselves engulfed as fire spread from one hull to the next. Chain reactions detonated secondary ammunition stores, each blast making the fleet look like a string of floating fireballs. Yet the men on board still had no target. Some screamed into radios, convinced they were under attack from hidden aircraft carriers. Yet no radar sweep showed anything except civilian ships far away on the trade lanes. The silence in the air fed the horror. Violence rained down without a visible enemy behind it. In less than 6 minutes, 26 ships slipped beneath the surface or lay burning wrecks. 4 were left crippled, unable to move or fire. Their surviving crews captured hours later by boarding teams. Hundreds of Iranian sailors were dead or floating as prisoners. What had begun as a confident secret operation ended without even a coordinated shot fired in retaliation. The fleet never fought a battle. It collapsed under a storm written in advance. And out on the waves, what remained was not only wreckage, but a goldmine of intelligence. Data that would turn destruction itself into the foundation of foresight. Iran's fleet didn't collapse because its ships were poorly built or its crews lacked training. It collapsed because the enemy had already written the script in advance, shaping the battlefield so thoroughly that deception turned into self-destruction. This wasn't a contest of strength, it was proof that modern wars are decided by intelligence systems, networks, and information grids that leave entire forces blind before they know they're fighting. So how many of today's conflicts are already settled before the first missile launches? Let me know in the comments. Share your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe for more.